Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we are going to unpack a methodology that completely revolutionized global business, transformed manufacturing, and honestly set a new, almost unbelievably high standard for quality. We're talking about a system that didn't just tweak the way massive corporations operate, but fundamentally rewired how they even think about perfection.
Okay, let's dive into this. 3.4. I know it looks super small, kind of unassuming, right? But in the world of process improvement, this specific number is the absolute holy grail. It is the ultimate target of perfection that companies literally spend millions of dollars trying to hit.
So you might be wondering, what in the world does 3.4 have to do with billions of dollars in corporate savings? Well, this tiny number actually represents 3.4 defects per 1 million opportunities. To put that into perspective, it means 99.99966% of the time, a process is operating entirely without error. Hitting this exact metric is what has allowed massive corporations to save billions, and yes, I mean billions of dollars, by totally eliminating waste and ensuring near-flawless customer satisfaction. To understand how they actually pull this off, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to look at the real-world cost of being almost perfect, define the Six Sigma method itself, map out everyday value streams, trace the fascinating history of quality, explore the corporate revolution it sparked, and finally, separate the myths from the reality. Let's get into it. Section 1. The cost of almost perfect, the high price of 99.97%. Think about it. In everyday life, if you get something right 99.97% of the time, you would absolutely call that a massive win. But in high-stakes environments, that tiny fraction of a percent is literally the difference between a successful operation and a complete disaster. Operating at a 99.97% accuracy rate is what's known as 5 sigma. At 5 sigma, out of the 51.4 million surgeries performed in the US each year, you'd see 11,976 errors. But if you tighten that process up just one level, to 6 sigma, those errors drop drastically to just 174. Think about air traffic. With over 10.4 million flights a year, 5 sigma gives you 2,426 errors. 6 sigma brings that down to just 35. When lives are on the line, the gap between 5 and 6 sigma is just massive. And what about the business side? Take Amazon Cyber Monday back in 2013, where they processed 36.8 million orders. If we assume a pretty conservative $35 cost per error, for return shipping and customer service, operating at 5 sigma would cost Amazon over 300 grand in just one single day. If they operate at 6 sigma, that loss is slashed to just over $4,000. So it's not just about tweaking error rates, it is about massive exponential cost savings. Moving on to Section 2, defining the Six Sigma method. This is all about replacing guesswork. So how do companies actually achieve this? Well, historically, a lot of leaders just made decisions based on gut feelings or intuition. Six Sigma completely replaces that guesswork with hard, unforgiving statistics. What's really interesting about the normal curve concept is that Six Sigma is fundamentally about understanding the variation inherent in absolutely any process. The whole overarching premise is that variation leads to opportunities for error, and errors lead to product defects. By working to reduce this variation, you actively pull those outliers right back into the center of the curve. In a true Six Sigma process, you've controlled the variation so perfectly that 99.99966% of products land flawlessly within customer expectations. Now, let's contrast this with how a lot of companies normally operate, through beta testing. Beta testing is basically the act of implementing a new idea with a select group just to identify potential problems before a widespread rollout. But doing this without Six Sigma's rigorous, data-first approach means organizations constantly experience unintended consequences. They launch ideas, blow through cash, and rely on a trial and error period that ends up damaging customer perception. Six Sigma demands that you validate your assumptions mathematically before you act. Section 3. Mapping the value stream. Or how to find those hidden efficiencies. To really understand how Six Sigma works on a micro level, you have to break down literally every single step of a process. Just consider the surprisingly long list of elements it takes to serve a simple hot dog with ketchup. You've got suppliers for the hot dog, the bun, and the ketchup. You need pots, tongs, someone doing the cooking, someone putting the dog in the bun, someone adding ketchup, and someone serving it. Mapping out this entire value stream reveals all the hidden inefficiencies. For instance, are 4 different people handling the hot dog or just one? If the product is being handed off 4 times, you have what lean management calls waste of conveyance. Removing unnecessary actions or extra hands totally reduces the opportunities for errors and cuts costs. You can actually apply this straight to your own kitchen. Imagine a pizzeria owner trying to reduce process variations so customers always get perfectly consistent pizzas. First, he gives employees a 1-cup measuring tool for small pizzas and a 2-cup for larges. But variation still creeps in because some employees scoop the cheese into a huge mound, while others leave empty air pockets. To fix this, the owner trains them to overfill the cup and then use a flat spatula to scrape the excess right off the rim. Boom, variation is drastically reduced. And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of Jidoka, which is a massive pillar of lean management that often goes hand in hand with Six Sigma. Jidoka demands that a process stops the exact moment an error is detected. Instead of waiting until the very end of the production line to find a defect and having to trace it all the way backward, you equip machines or people to instantly recognize a bad output. This allows for immediate troubleshooting on the spot. All right, Section 4, a brief history of quality. It's been a centuries-long journey. So where did all these concepts actually come from? It's honestly like this fascinating baton pass of genius across the centuries. The roots started way back in the 19th century when Carl Friedrich Gauss developed the normal curve. Then, jumping to the early 20th century, Walter Schuhart became the first person to closely relate sigma levels and quality, inventing control charts for manufacturing. Post-World War II, W. Edwards Deming took these statistical concepts to Japan, planting the exact seeds that Kiichiro Toyota and Taiichi Ohno would evolve into the famous Toyota production system, which was the birth of lean. Finally, in the 1980s, Motorola brought the whole shebang together into the Six Sigma methodology we know today. Let's see how this builds, specifically with W. Edwards Deming's PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, act. You make a plan for improvement, you do something to test it out, you check the results, and then you act by scaling those improvements. But the real magic here? It's a circle. It proves that in Six Sigma, continuous improvement literally never ends. The moment a project is complete, controls are put in place, and you immediately start looking for the next area to improve. Section 5, the Corporate Six Sigma Revolution. This is where we talk about scaling this up. This is the era where these statistical concepts were unleashed on corporate America, and the financial stakes were absolutely massive. In the 1980s, Motorola CEO Bob Galvin challenged his team to improve quality tenfold. Engineers Bill Smith and Mikkel Harry realized measuring defects per 1,000 just wasn't enough. They had to measure per million. The result? Motorola saved more than $16 billion in just 12 years. Then, GE CEO Jack Welch caught on. He historically tied employee reward structures and bonuses directly to Six Sigma goals. GE achieved estimated savings of $7 to $10 billion. It proved this wasn't just some niche engineering tool, but a total business transformation model. Finally, Section 6, challenges, myths, and reality. Because overcoming hurdles is just part of the game. Look, it's vital to acknowledge that rolling out a system this rigorous and unyielding gets some organizational pushback. One of the biggest myths out there is that Six Sigma is way too rigid, overly focused on metrics, and basically ignores common sense. But the reality is the exact opposite. Six Sigma actually starts with traditional, common sense ideas, often just generated through basic brainstorming, and simply validates those assumptions with hard data. It empowers common sense by mathematically proving whether a gut feeling is actually right or wrong, which, yeah, sometimes upsets leaders who are used to just making unquestioned calls. So, the crucial point is, when Six Sigma fails, it is almost never the math's fault. Common barriers include leaders who enthusiastically start a project but then just kind of lose interest before it's even finished. Or employees who are genuinely fearful of change, worrying that highly efficient improvements might make their own jobs obsolete. And perhaps the biggest hurdle for sure, simply not having access to consistent, accurate, and valid data streams to measure in the first place. Which brings us to the end of today's explainer. But I want to leave you with this one last provocative thought. Think about your own daily workflows, your email management, your household chores, your routines. If your personal processes were measured against that ultimate target of 3.4 defects per million opportunities, what Sigma level would you actually be operating at? Could you use a flat spatula to level out the variation in your own life? Keep learning, keep improving, and we'll see you in the next explainer.